Good morning.
Hey, we're back to learning the daily daf. What could be better? Okay, so today's daf is Mem Beis 42, and we're just gonna finish off the last from the yesterday's daf, 6 lines from the bottom, 41b, and where it says it's actually 5 lines from the bottom. So we're getting to the end of Chazaka, about 3 years. There's about 14 pages, 14 daf in the Gemara, and we're in the last piece so where it says Shlosha Lekuchas, 41b, the end of 41b. So the Gemara discusses what do you do when you have 3 lekuchas, 3 buyers who together they make a chazaka. That means 1 year, let's say his 1 year so the owner is Reuven, and then you have Shimon, Levi, and Yehudah. So we have 4 people. The owner is Reuven, and then Shimon. Okay, then you have Shimon, who was there the first year. Shimon, he ate the fruits of the field for the first year, and then that was it. Then the second year, Levi came and he ate the fruits. And the third year was Yehudah. So you have 3 people making the 3 people who are here 3 years. So says Rav, Amar Rav, Shleish Lekuchas Mitzarfen. It seems to be the halacha that they can combine. You can combine the 3 of them to make a chazaka, and Yehudah, the one who was there the third year, he wins over the owner. The owner says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "No, I was here 1 year, but I bought it from 3. But together we got 3 years, so he wins." Amar Rav, says Rav, Kulam b'shtar. There must be a shtar. There must be a contract between so Shimon is there the first year, and Levi's there the second, and Yehuda's there the third year. So there has to be a contract between Shimon and Levi. And then also the contract says, okay, Shimon sold the field to Levi. And again, also Levi needs to make a contract that he sold the field to Yehudah. So don't just say, okay, fine, it's enough to have witnesses that the field was sold. You need to have a shtar. You need to have a contract. The point is that when you make when there's a shtar, contract is written, it becomes public knowledge. When a contract is written, when a field is sold with a contract, everyone hears about it. When you have just witnesses, if you make a sale in front of 2 witnesses, it's kept quiet. Some people hear, some people don't. Not everyone hears about it. The point is, we want the owner to hear, to know about the sale, to know that the field was sold. Why? Because otherwise, if he doesn't know about the sale, he doesn't care. He doesn't care to make a protest, because he says, I sold the field 3 years ago to Shimon. Okay, and so if Shimon would be here by himself for 3 years, I would be concerned. I would make a protest. But here I see Shimon himself. He left the field. He didn't try to make a chazaka. He gave it. Someone else is here, and then the third year, even the third person's here. So what do I have to make a protest if nobody's being here to nobody's getting too comfortable? So if he doesn't hear about the sale, he just thinks that people are randomly popping into the field, to his field. He doesn't care. He doesn't bring his attention to make a protest. However, if he knows if there's a contract and it becomes public information, he knows that the people, it's not just random people popping in. He knows that it's people who are trying to build a chazaka, and he knows that it's all because there's a reason why they're here, because they bought it from Shimon, who bought the field from him, and therefore he has to make a protest. The point is, we want the sale to reach his ears. So if you have just Adim witnesses, okay, he doesn't know. He doesn't know that there's a sale. It's just random people popping in. But if there's a contract, then he heard about it, then he will be curious, then he'll know to make a protest. And if he didn't, then he loses out. So it depends. If there's Amar Rav Kulam B'shtar, there must be a contract. Okay. Otherwise, that there's no chazaka. So now the Gemara breaks this down about contract. So it seems like that. It seems like that a contract. Whenever there's a contract happening, there's always it becomes public information. With Adim, witnesses, it seems like no, never. So the Gemara is going to break that down because we find that in other places, even Adim, even witnesses, when you do a transaction in front of witnesses, people find out. Okay, says the Gemara, ask the Gemara, Adim less Kollel, you're telling me that witnesses, a transaction in front of Adim, in front of witnesses, there's no call, it doesn't become, nobody hears about it. Rav taught us somewhere else, a different halacha, not by chazaka, somewhere else. Says like this: one who sells his field with Adim. Adim means witnesses, no contract, right? Sometimes it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it can be just with witnesses. Okay, so he sold his field, and then so you have the buyer and the seller. The buyer bought the field, and then somebody, a third person, comes to the buyer and says, "This field is mine because I lent the seller money, and his field, all his properties were so I have a lien on his property. I have a lien on the seller's property, and you bought that field, so it's too bad. It's mine." Because it was mishubad. Mishubad means it was for a lien. It was for a lien because I lent the money and then he had no right to sell it because it was really intended for me. So now, fine, that was the end of the story. But then the buyer goes back to the seller and says, "I gave you money for the field. Give me back my money." See what happened, Jules? It's two steps. Step one was that the third person comes and takes the field from the buyer. Right. Because I lent he owes me money, and now the buyer wants his money back from the seller. So says Rav, so the buyer goes back to the seller, and he can take other properties, which the seller post his sale. Right, everything has to be post before anything that's before. You have no right to that. But he can go back to the seller, and if the seller has sold all his other properties, he can take them out. Okay, so that's the halacha of Rav. So the question is, over there it says that the buyer bought the field with Adim, with witnesses. It doesn't say a contract. Okay, so how come the buyer who can go to the other buyers who bought fields after him, if there's no, okay, if there was no contract, if there's a contract, so they know and they have to be careful. But if there's Adim, if there's just witnesses, we just learned before that nobody knows about it. So therefore, if nobody knows about it, so we can say maybe we can say it's too bad. We can say if they can argue and say we didn't hear about it. There was no way for us to find out. Says the Gemara. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Says the Gemara. The last two words on the page on 41b. Hasam lekuchais inhu afsidu anafshayu. Over there, lekuchos. Over there, we're talking about that buyers. Okay, so there's really two buyers over here. That's why it's confusing. The first buyer tells the second buyer, this field is your field which you bought after me was mishubad. It was leaning. It was for me. It was intended for me. Because okay, so you should have investigated in the properties of the seller to make sure there's nothing going on. There's nothing fishy in his property. Right, and because you spent money, and you spent money, you should have looked into it. You should have hired a lawyer to find out. Even though there's no contract of my sale didn't have a contract. But if you wanted to find out, you could have found out. Go to hire a lawyer to find out. As opposed to before, by chazaka, you don't have that reason, and therefore, so the way it comes out is like this: when you have witnesses. Usually standard, there is no call. There's no voice. There's no sound. Nobody hears about it. However, if you want to find out, then you can find out. That's how it works with witnesses. The contract, it just automatically becomes public information. That's okay. Says the Gemara, Rav Hachi. Did Rav teach us? Now the Gemara is going to break down the other halacha about selling your field with the buyer and the seller. We're going to see that that doesn't fit with something else that Rav said. The Gemara is going to ask the question, and we're going to give an answer. So we have the first thing that Rav said was that if you sell, buyer buys a field, and then the third person takes it away from him because he lent the seller money. So Rav says you can go. The buyer goes back to the seller and gets his money back from even the next buyer. So the question is, Rav Hachi, did Rav say the Rav hold like that? But nan hamalves chavere b'shtar. A person who lends his friend money with a contract, he collects from properties which are mishubad. What's the English word for mishubad?
Encumbered or encumbered.
Encumbered. There we go. So when it's you lend your friend money with a contract, then you can collect from his properties which are encumbered. Okay, because it's a contract. It's a halva, a loan with a contract. Al yedei edem, if you lent them just with edem, with witnesses, you can only collect from properties which are free, but if they're mishubad, they're encumbered. That's no, it's too bad. So the point is, because we look at the buyers and they say, look, if something's public information, public knowledge, there's a contract, everybody knows. Okay, we can then we should have been more careful. But if there's witnesses on a loan, witnesses, it's very hard for us to find out if there was a loan, because there's no way. It was pretty hidden, right? It's not known to the public, and therefore we can say, okay, we can say, okay, fine. We there's no way we could have known. If we should have known and been more careful, okay, fine. So then we understand it was we should have been more careful. But over here we did our best. So why do we have to lose? Because we tried our hardest, and why do we have to lose? So that's what Rav says, that when it comes to a loan, there's a difference between a milva b'shtar, a contract, a loan with a contract, or a loan with witnesses. So, yeah.
Previously, we were talking Chazaka with witnesses was sufficient, but we're saying that with a loan, it changes everything.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the major difference. Okay.
Well, not with Chazaka, with a buyer. There's a buyer and a seller. A buyer and the buyer buys a field and someone takes it away from him.
Mm-hmm.
So now it becomes that the seller owes the buyer money.
Right.
The buyer bought the field. Someone took it away from him. So now that money which I gave you have to give back.
But wasn't the idea of the witnesses so people would know?
So the Gemara is gonna answer right now.
Okay.
Good. Wait for the okay.
Okay. That's exciting.
Yeah. So v'chi tema, if you'll tell me, maybe you'll tell me like this: Rav Tana hu palig. Maybe Rav argues on the Mishnah. Okay, Rav was the Amira, but he was like by the change between the Mishnah and the Gemara. So sometimes the Gemara says that when you ask a question on Rav from a Mishnah or a Brisa, the Gemara says that Rav has the power to argue on a Mishnah, which is an exception, because you don't find that by any other Amirayim, just by Rav, because he was the first generation of the Gemara. So he sometimes has the power to argue on the Mishnah. So maybe you'll suggest that the Mishnah, Rav argues on the Mishnah. Says the Gemara says no, because we find Rav himself says like the Mishnah. But Rav Shmuel Damri Tervayu, Rav and Shmuel said, Milva al peh, alone. Al peh means orally, that means with no contract, just with witnesses. Eina govel loyman yarshem v'loyman al kuchas. It's you don't collect from yarshem. Yarshem are the inheritors, and lekuchas are buyers. because because it's a milva, it's a loan with witnesses. I'll pay orally, and the same thing, because if there's a contract, so then the lakuch, the buyers, find out, and they should have been more careful. If it's al peh, so then they don't know. So then they can say we didn't know. So what do you see from here? You see from here that Rav agrees to the Mishnah. So how come Rav before, when there's a buyer and a seller and the field gets taken away from the buyer, and now the buyer wants to go back and get his money back? Why? How come over there he has a right to go to the nechasim meshubadim? What was the word?
Oh, the encumbered.
The encumbered properties. How come he has a right? It was only with witnesses. Witnesses. There's no call. There's no voice. It's not heard. So says the Gemara. This is the question. This is the answer. The famous answer. Milva asvini karamis. So we're asking two different. We're putting together we're asking from two different places. One is a milva, a loan, and one's a sale. Okay, okay, so the Gemara is going to explain. Milva a kika yazef, bitzina yazef. A loan, when a person borrows money, they do it privately and they try to hide it. A person needs money. A person's desperate for money. He doesn't go make a public announcement that I am borrowing right now $10,000. It remains. He does it. He keeps it private. He keeps it hidden. He doesn't want the whole world to know that he's borrowing money. And therefore, if there's a contract, so then the contract somehow has it's like a microphone. The contract just amplifies everything somehow. That's how in the Gemara's eyes that's what a contract does. But without that, without the contract, all you have is witnesses. So without a contract, so then it depends. If it's a milva, a loan, a person borrows money hiddenly. And the Gemara explains why. In order, a person's properties should not go down in value. So now, if a person for some reason borrows money, and then then they have to sell their property to pay back. So now, if everybody knows that they're selling the property, that they have a loan. If everybody knows that they have a loan, they owe a lot of money. So then the properties are going to go down because everybody knows that he only needs to. He doesn't really want to sell his property. He just needs to get the money back. He's desperate for the money. So they're gonna buy it for less. Right? When when the bank sells a house, they're desperate for the money, so they sell for cheaper. So he's gonna sell it the people are gonna buy it for cheaper. So he doesn't want people to know, so he can get full price. That's why a person tries to hide a loan. And even just human logic, human psychology. A person doesn't want the whole world to know that he's poor. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara doesn't say that. So I'm just adding that in as a question. Why the Gemara didn't say that? But a person borrows money when hiddenly, and therefore, if there's just Adam, that all you have is witnesses. There's no call. There's no vote. It doesn't go around. However, by Hizvini, by the sale, by the buyer and the seller, where a third person comes and takes out the field from him, so over there it was a sale. Okay, the money is owed because of a sale. Over there, a person buys a property, he buys public because he wants people to know that he bought the field. Because otherwise, if you buy something hiddenly, so then everybody's going to start looking and say, "Why are you here?" And therefore, over there the transaction was a sale. Over here it was a loan. So there's a big difference. By a loan, it becomes it's very contained. Nobody knows about it. But by a sale, everybody knows, and therefore they should have been more careful. So it really depends what's going on. If there's witnesses on a sale, then everybody knows. If there's witnesses on a loan, then it's hidden information. Zvini, let's just read the last line. Zvini, by a sale. A person buys a field in public, In order there should be not public knowledge. He wants people to know about it. And that's the difference between a loan and a sale. Steve, we're on 42B. 42A. 42A, about 12 lines from the top. Tanu Rabbanan. Tanu Rabbanan. So you have over here like this. You have chazaka. You have the father, a person bought a field and he ate the field for 1 year, and then he passed on to the next world, and his son inherited the field, and his son ate the field 2 more years. So you have a total of 3 years. The father ate 1 year, and the son ate the next 2 years. So you got 3 together. If the father ate the field 1 year, and the son ate 2 more years, or question. No, yeah, or ha'av means or the other way around. Ha'av shtayim, the father ate 2 years, v'aben shana, and the son ate the final year. Or a third case, ha'av shana, the father ate 1 year, v'aben, and the son shana another year, v'halokeach, and then a buyer bought it off the son, he ate the 3rd year. Says the Brisa, harezu chazaka, he acquires chazaka. This is similar to what we had before when you have 3 buyers. Yeah. So here it's similar. Says the Gemara, remember the lekech is like kala. You're telling me that the buyer, okay? Because we also said a buyer. When the buyer in the 3rd year, there's a cult. There's knowledge that he bought the field, right? It doesn't say he bought it with shtar. It says he bought. Oh, I'm sorry. It doesn't say. Oh, meaning to say that if a buyer buys the field, that there's knowledge about it, and the owner knows about the sale. Again, because like we said before, if he doesn't know about the sale, he has no reason to protest. So you're telling me that he knows about the sale and he should have protested, and that's a proof that he did that's a proof on your chazaka. You're telling me that there's a call, there's knowledge. For a mini, we have a brisa saying differently. Achla b'fneihav. See, here it's a little different. The first brisa was the father and the son were the buyers. In this case over here, the father and the son were their owners. And so you're trying to get a chazaka on their property. So the father, you bought the field from the father, and after 1 year, the father passed away. So you ate 3 years. So in 1 year was in front of the father, and the next 2 years were in front of the son. I mean, you're the same person. You're the buyer is the same person. The claimer is the same person, but the owner changed. The owner changed because it was first the father's, then it became the son's. So a little different. For a mini, achla b'fnei shana. You ate in front of the father 1 year. The claimer ate. The claimer ate the fruits of the field 1 year in front of the father. Ubifnei haben shtayim, in front of the son 2 more years. Or bifnei ha'av shtayim, in front of the father 2. Ubifnei haben shana, in front of the son 1. Bifnei ha'av shana. Or a third case, you ate in front of the father 1 year. Bifnei haben shana, in front of the son a 2nd year. Or bifnei lekeach shana, in front of the lekeach a 3rd year. Harezu chazaka. That's a chazaka. So let's just try to picture what's happening. You have the claimer eating the fruits 1 year, eating the fruits 3 years. The first year was the father. 2nd year was the son. The 3rd year, the son got up and sold the field to the 3rd person. So 1 second, if the claimer knows about that sale, that the Gemara then he should have been more careful about his contract, because that should be a protest when the son who owns the field gets up and sells it. So that itself is a protest. A protest can be, okay, fine, you're coming and you're saying, don't get what are you doing in my field because it's mine, I never sold it to you. That's one way to protest. Another way to protest is to get up and make us and sell the field. Right? Because now you need proof, right? So that itself is a protest. For example, if the owner makes a sale in front of the claimer, and he sells the field, he doesn't say, okay, what do you do? Get out of my field. He said, look, I'm selling the field to the 3rd person. that itself speaks itself out as a protest. So if you're telling me that lokeach there's knowledge when a person buys a field, that itself is the biggest protest. Must be that if it's a chazaka, you see that lokeach, a buyer, there's no knowledge, and therefore that's not a macha, that's not a protest. Protest is something that he finds out. So you see from here that a sale, there's no knowledge about it. Otherwise, it'd be chazaka. So how could you tell me before? How could you tell me before that a lokeach there is knowledge by a buyer? It would seem like it's a contradiction. Says the Gemara, Amar Papa Kitanya Ahi b'Meicher Sedais Stam. That the Brisa which teaches us that lokeach, that he doesn't know about it, really he knows about it. But but it was a different type of sale. It was a sale where he sold all his fields. The son, the owner, okay, you're the claimer, you're in the field. The son owns the field. The son was so you have the father, the son, and the third year was lokeach. So so we're talking about that he didn't just buy this field, he bought all of the son's properties. So the claimer can say, okay, the reason why I lost my contract was because I thought you sold him all your properties that are the other properties. You didn't say, okay, specify this property. If you specify this property, so then that's some protest. Here, I heard what I heard was that you sold all your properties. So I said I was thinking to myself, okay, fine, you sold all the properties, that the other properties, this one no, and therefore I didn't care about my contract. It wasn't clear, It wasn't clear that he's selling this property, and therefore he becomes comfortable and he says, I bought this field, I had a contract, but it's 3 years already. It's been 3 years. Did he protest? No, he didn't protest. He sold other fields, but this field is fine. This field's okay, and therefore he acquires chazaka. But it doesn't mean to say that there's no knowledge, because really there is knowledge on a sale.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. This is going to come up more about at the end, about when it comes to the end of the Bava Batra in about 3 months, or maybe even 4 months. It's going to come up more about a buyer, a loan, and who you can collect from. Yeah, more about that. Okay. Fine. Okay, so now we're shifting over from Chazaka to a new Mishnah, which is a little bit, we're shifting from Chazaka to a different type of Chazaka now. Until now, it's Chazaka of 3 years, and now we're going to go to a Chazaka of Metaltalin. Metaltalin is movable items, portable objects, which we explained, which we saw a couple of days ago, is that you acquire chazaka immediately. As soon as you have something in your possession, then it's yours. Even if there's witnesses that the owner once upon a time owned it. For example, a watch. The owner says, "What are you doing with my watch? It was mine. I can prove it to you. I have witnesses." And the seller says, "I bought it from you." And so he gets a chazaka. He acquires a chazaka ownership immediately, as long as he says, "Okay, I bought it from you." If he says, "I stole it from you," then then of course not. So now the Mishnah lists a few people who don't have that chazaka of portable chazaka. Let's call it the portable chazaka. So ha'omnin are craftsmen, or like a tailor, a carpenter, or those type of people. Ha'omnin, they don't have a chazaka. So, for example, if the owner says, "This is my garment, this is my suit, this is my jacket," or he's a watchmaker, he's a watchmaker, he fixes watches, and the owner says, "This is my watch," and the omen, the worker claims, "It's mine, I buy it from you." So no, that's not a chazaka, because he deals with other people's objects all the time. So he has to prove it with a contract or with witnesses. It's not enough just to claim, "Okay, it's mine, I buy it from you." Shutfin, the same thing is with partners. You have 2 partners who partner up in a actually, this is actually a field. This is actually a field. Rashbam says this is a field. Two partners split a field 50-50, and then one of the partners claims the other after 3 years of eating the fruits of the other of the other half of the whole field, he claims I bought the field. So and I lost my contract. No, so there's no chazaka. Okay. Parisin, you have a sharecropper. The same thing. The sharecropper claims he bought the field. No chazaka. Petrupin, same thing as a Petrupin is the helper for the Yisomim who claims that he has that he bought the field. Ein lam chazaka, there's no chazaka. They have to prove it with Eidim, with witnesses, or with a contract. Loi leish chazaka b'nechsei ishtay. A husband doesn't acquire a chazaka on the properties of his wife. This is actually going back to chazaka of 3 years. Okay. So a husband eats the fruits of his wife's property for 3 years, and then he claims that he bought he bought it from her, and he claims he bought it from her, and he lost his contract. No chazaka, because a wife lets her husband eat the fruits for 3 years, for 4 years, whatever it is, and she doesn't care. So there's no proof. So we're talking about that there's a divorce happening, and they're trying to figure out which property is whose, and the husband says, "No, this property was yours, but I bought it from you." So no, he does not. There's no chazaka. He has to prove it. But the same thing. A woman does not acquire chazaka in the property of her husband. The same argument. She's arguing and said, "I bought it from him," and he says, "No, I never sold it to you." So then there's no chazaka, because the normal thing is that a husband allows his wife to go into his field, both ways. It's mutual. Same thing. The father does not acquire chazaka in the properties of his son. The same thing, a son does not acquire chazaka on the properties of his father. If a dispute happens between the father and the son, why is that happening? I don't know, but let's say it happened. So then there's no chazaka. You have to prove it. All the above is b'machzik, by somebody who's trying to get a chazaka of 3 years. It means there's no witness, there's no proof, but he's arguing that I bought it from you and I lost my contract. So that's that type of chazaka. Then you need 3 years, or when there's no witnesses. Matana, when you are trying to establish chazaka. So this is another type of chazaka. Chazaka means, so when a person sells real estate, so then you can change the ownership. You can acquire ownership with a kinyan, with an active acquisition. And there's 3 ways to do that. There's 3 ways to buy a house. There's 3 ways to make a kinyan, an action on a house, on a field, on real estate, and that is with kesef, with money, a shtar, a contract, and chazaka. So this chazaka is it's another type of chazaka. Chazaka means you're showing ownership. You're doing an action of showing ownership. Let's say you build the lock on the door, or you plow the field a little bit. So that shows you're showing ownership. So 2 people want it. There's 2 people. The buyer and the seller. The buyer wants to buy a field, and we have witnesses here. So now, but the sale is not final until you make a kinyan. Just like we find by portable things, portable objects, you have to do a chazaka. You have to do either a meshicha, you're pulling it into your possession, or you lift it up, or you make the chalipin, which we explained with the handkerchief. You're doing an act of acquisition. So real estate has different ways of doing that, right? You can't pick up the property, you can't pick up the house, right? It's gonna break, or it's too heavy. But you can. So there's 3 ways. Kesef was the money, a contract, a shtar, kesef, shtar, chazaka. Money, contract, or showing ownership. Showing ownership is an act of kinyan, an act of acquisition, and that with that you get that becomes yours. So it says the Mishnah, when you have two people fighting over a field, and without knowing whose it is. When 2 people agree, they're trying to make a sale final, either it's a matana, it's a gift, or achin shechalku, or you have two brothers splitting up, making a chalukah, dividing up the inheritance, or someone's trying to acquire ownership on the property of a ger. A ger is somebody who doesn't have any inheritors, or if he passes away. Usually, someone who passes away, if he doesn't have any children, so you go back to his brothers, or you go up to his uncles, and so on, because every year, every Jewish person has inheritors, all the way back. And the way we're going to see, it comes up later how Yerusha works. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. First it goes to the children. If there's no children, it goes back up. It goes back to his siblings. If not, if they don't have any children, then it goes back. It goes up all the way back to the forefathers. However, but a ger is he doesn't have. So if he has children, so then they get his estate. But if he doesn't have yarshim, he doesn't have any children. So then his estate becomes hefker. It becomes public. Probably everyone has public rights to it, and whoever comes first wins, acquires ownership. So now a person wants to acquire ownership on the property, the estate of a ger. So you can't. So there's only one way to do that. It's chazaka, showing ownership. When you show ownership on his estate, then it becomes yours. A buyer and a seller, you have the option of kesef, money, and a contract. But by a ger, he's not here anymore. He passed on. The only way to do it is chazaka, is showing ownership. So it says the Mishnah. How do you do that? Na'al, the last line on the page, the last line of the Mishnah. Na'al, you lock. So here, Rashbam explains. There's a question about this, if I remember correctly. Na means you locked. You locked the door. So lock the door can mean two things. Either you built a lock, the door was just open and close, and you built a lock, or it means you just locked. You just turned the knob. So the Rashbam over here says it means the first one. You actually built the lock. You built the door. So that's an act because you're trying to show ownership. Just by turning the knob, that doesn't show so much ownership. So it says Rashbam, it means that you built a door. You built a door. You built the lock. That shows that you're trying to get ownership, and that is an act of acquisition. Or v'gadar, you built a fence. Uparats, it was fenced off. There's no way to get in, and you made a breach. You made a breach that people can get in. That's showing ownership. Harezu chazaka. That is a chazaka, a different type of chazaka, showing that it's now yours, and nobody can go back. And both of them can't go back on the sale, and nobody can take it away from you. The sale is final, and it's yours, or whatever. The gift is final, whatever it was. Okay. So we're starting the Gemara. We're running out of time. So it says the Gemara. We discussed about a partner and a uman, a craftsman, who the Mishnah said they don't acquire chazaka because there's no proof that it's yours by being here because that's your job, or either you're a partner or you're a craftsman. So the Gemara said that there was different versions of the Mishnah. Avur Shmuel v'Levi Tanu. So you have Avur Shmuel and Levi. They both said Shotef ein chazaka. Just like the partner doesn't have a chazaka, but Kolshkin Uman for sure a craftsman. Both of them don't have chazaka because there's no proof. However, Shmuel had a different version of the Mishnah. Uman ein chazaka. Only a craftsman doesn't have a chazaka. Avol Shotef, however, a partner yesh chazaka. An uman, a craftsman who's dealing with other people's things every single day. Him, there's no chazaka. But a partner, there is a chazaka. Because a partner is, his friend should have spoken up if something was fishy. V'az the Shmuel tamei, and Shmuel goes, and we find the Shmuel goes with his reasoning. The Amar Shmuel taras hashotvin machzikin zalza. Partners can acquire chazaka on each other. So that's what we see that Shmuel said. Shmuel holds like his saying somewhere else, and he also said another thing. Shmuel said three things about partners. One of them is they can acquire chazaka on each other. Number two, umeidin zalza, and they can testify for each other. Okay, so usually we can say someone who's nogeya be'edus, somebody who's who has ulterior motives is puzzle, is invalid for saying, is invalid for saying for eidos, for testimony. Right? You're nogea b'davar. So so he says Shmuel, no, partners are kosher witnesses to say testimony, to testify on each other. That's fine. V'nasin shemrei sachar zelazeh, and they acquire the status of a shemer sachar. For example, if they are safeguarding their friend's property, and sometimes that's what they do, they swap. So we say they become a shemer sachar. So there's they become a paid watchman. So even though they're not really actually getting paid, but they're not getting paid directly, but they're getting paid that I'm watching for you and you're watching and you're watching for me. They swap, and that itself is a gain. It's a gain for me when I'm watching for you, because then you'll watch for me. So even though it's not directly getting paid, but it's another form of getting paid, and therefore they're considered a paid watchman who has to be more careful about his friend's property, and he's responsible for much more than a shemer chinam, free watchman. So that's what Shmuel said 3 things about chazaka. So we're bringing it down, and we're bringing it down to prove that they can acquire chazaka. The Gemara now, once the Gemara brings it down, the Gemara is going to break down the other 2 things. I'm going to question them, and we're going to see later about that. Says the Gemara, Rami le Rav Abba le Rav Yehudah. Rav Abba asked a question to Rav Yehudah, B'ma'arta devei Rav Zakkai, in the cave, the Ma'ara, the cave of Rav Zakkai. Mi amar Shmuel shutef yesh le chazaka. Did Shmuel teach us that shutef, a partner, acquires chazaka? V'ha amar Shmuel shutef ki yeri b'rshus dami. A shutef, a partner, is like a yori b'rshus. A yori b'rshus means like this. I see, for example, let's just explain what a yored is, and then we'll stop there. So a yored means like I see your field, your field, and it's empty. So I go into the field and I bring in animals, and I bring a plow, and I invest in the field, and I invest a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and after 1 year, the fruits grow. They grow. It's all. Everything's good. And we make and it's worth a lot of money. So I invested in the field, and then I claim to the owner. It says it's your field, but I invested in it, and I have every right. I have all the rights to all the rights to the crop, to the fruits. So the owner, so that's called a yored. So there's 2 types of yored: a yored with permission and without permission. So a yored b'rshus, this comes up. This is probably what comes up in the Jewish courts all over, because when you have a Jewish tenant and a Jewish landlord, because the Jewish tenant puts some money into the apartment, into the house, and then when he leaves, he says, "I bet your let's say in air conditioning." Mm-hmm. The tenant puts in the air conditioning, and then it's worth more because now it's as good AC. So what do you do? So there's a yored b'rshus with permission and without permission. So with permission, the halacha is without permission, we say that you're pretty okay. So it depends like this. If there's with permission, then you have a good hand in the situation. We'll see more tomorrow. Without permission, we say it depends. You can only get back your yitzia, your investment. Whatever you put in, you get back. You don't get the shvach. The shvach is the gain. The gain you don't get. You just get your investment. However, if the shvach, so it really depends. The Gemara, we'll see more about it tomorrow. It depends. If the gain sometimes could be more than the investment, and sometimes less. So you always get what the yada al tachtona. You get what's less. If the investment was less, you get back your investment. If the gain was less, you only get back the gain. So it's you have the lower hand, and don't go into your friend's field without his permission, because you have the lower hand. But if it's b'rshus with permission, he gave you permission, then you get much more. You have an upper hand over here, and we'll see more about that tomorrow. Okay.